Am I audible? Am I audible to everyone? So let's begin by our calming and centering exercise. So wherever you are seated, you can try to be as comfortable as possible. Relax your body and close your eyes. And we take 3 deep breaths. And then we will chant the sound Om. When we chant Om, we try to draw it out as long as we can while immersing ourselves in this sound vibration that has the potential to connect our consciousness and higher cosmic realities. So close your eyes and as you breathe in and breathe out, just let yourself experience the breath as it comes in and goes out. Together, you take a deep breath. Inhale. 1. 2. 3. Now together, let us utter the sound Om. And we will keep it and draw the Om sound as long as we can. Let's do once more. Take 3 deep breaths and this time as you're breathing and breathing out. Try to observe your body's muscles. Whenever you see tension, you try to squeeze it, relax. One. 2. 3. One last time. Take a gentle breath and open your eyes. Thank you. Actually, don't see this with your broadly on the topic of community. understandings of what the mind is or why it troubles us. Or let's take another way. What are the typical ways in which you have found that the mind management is a challenge for you? There are different ways in which our mind may be a challenge for us. What are the typical ways in which you have found the mind to be a challenge for you? Thoughts. Okay, so what about thoughts? That's true. What about the thoughts exactly?
If we want to achieve a certain task and they are scattered all over the place.
Okay, so that's good. Thank you. The thoughts are scattered. That can be a problem. We'll use another word for scattered thoughts is that they are thoughts often get also distracted. That's a major problem for all of us. Thank you. There's a sociologist who said that our life today is that we are distracted from distraction by distraction. So, you're watching one thing, you start watching something else, and by watching that something else, we distracted from something else. That's our situation today. Okay. Anything else? Procrastination, yes. So how is the procrastination related to the mind exactly?
We think to do certain task, but when we want to do that certain task, we thought let's do little late, and all kind of.
Yes. So something within us says, do it later. What is the hurry? Isn't it? Procrastination is where? Basically, we put off things and then we can put off things for days or weeks. There are certain things you are mandating which we have to do. There are many things which would be good if we did them, but they will not be mandatory, and then we miss out on all the potential for improvement or enrichment that is there. Procrastination is a significant problem. Anything else?
My name is Sugir. Our mind imagines things which are not there, and that makes us anxious for what's to come, and that troubles us a lot, even though we might not be able to.
Yes. So it subjects us to imaginary anxieties. In psychological analysis of the mind, there is the story that there's a doctor, and a woman came to him, Doctor, I'm in big trouble. He said, what is the problem? There's a frog in my stomach, and I can feel the frog running around constantly. He said, no, there's no frog in my stomach. He said, no, it is there. And the doctor said, okay, tell me about it. I've gone to 10 doctors till now, and nobody's accepting, but I can feel it. It's waking up in my life. He realized this is a serious case of delusion. So the only way he thought to deal with it is, okay, let me do some tests. And he pretended, actually, I found the frog there. What do you want to do? He says, I want to be such a good video. Okay. He gave us a little anesthesia. And this takes a normal surgical incision to the belly. And he called one of the assistants to go to a nearby pond and brought a frog from there. And he showed her, I found this frog. Now we are free. Oh, thank you, doctor, so much. You are relieved me. I am so happy now. I am so peaceful. And I really thought this was a very clever and nice solution. And a few days later, this same lady came back in utterly frantic anxiety. Said, Doctor, the frog had babies. And those babies are going around. So what happens for us? at the time something inside us seems to snap. And then we often do things which we know we should not be doing. When I was growing up, I had a bit of a temper. And having a bad temper is a problem. But when I was growing up, one of my hobbies was to just learn English words, become a dictionary and memorize words. So because of that, I had a very good vocabulary. I soon found that a bad temper and a good vocabulary is a deadly combination.
If you have a bad temper, it's very different when people get angry, they just scream and rant and yell, and most people become incoherent when they are speaking something, when they get angry. But if somebody has a good vocabulary, they keep biting, sarcastic, cutting, and that's just something from inside which was like sabotaging whatever friendships or whatever social connections that was trying to develop. So yes, anger is a big issue. Something from inside seems to sabotage us. Yes. Anything else? Desire. So is desire itself a problem? It can become a problem. So especially when the desire becomes excessive. Image's desire is natural. But desire can become excessive and sometimes it can even become destructive. So, we all need some amount of recreation. Throughout human history, entertainment has been a part of life. Take a break from the monotony of life. But then, for many people nowadays, entertainment is not a break from life. Life is a break from entertainment. It's like the movie world or the social media world, the gaming world. That is the real world. And everything else that I have to do is to get it out of my way so that I can go back there. And that is leading to a lot of distortion. So yes, desires as one way, addiction is also a tragic way where any kind of addiction is where the desires become excessive. Yes.
I think desire is not a problem, but incompletion of desire will be a problem.
Yeah, it's both ways. It's a good insight. Desire can be a problem in two ways. One is the frustration of desire. When we seek something and we don't get it, that is a problem. The other is domination by desire, where the desire starts completely controlling and dominating our life. This is where, for example, something can become addictive. Where alcoholic may think that I'm not able to get a drink, that's why I'm in distress, I'm in misery. But actually, the desire for alcohol may be what is driving the person and that is destroying the life of the person, so the domination by desire can be compromised. So it's both ways. Sometimes we have a desire and we don't get what we want, and that becomes a cause of distress. Sometimes having the desire is itself can be a cause of problem. So freedom can be in two ways. We can have freedom for our desires, and we can have freedom from the desires. So some desires are just worth being free from. If somebody is alcoholic and they can recover from alcoholism, they are free from that desire. That's everything. Somebody is into drugs and they get free from that. So there are both these kind of freedoms. Freedom for, I'm free, now I'm free for doing this. And freedom for could be political freedom, cultural freedom, financial freedom. That could be free for. But freedom from is more of psychological freedom. So what in the Vedic tradition is called as attachment or asakti. That can sometimes become unhealthy, where we need to be free from that kind of desire. Anything else? Lack of emotional regulation. Lack of emotional regulation, yes. Sorry? Well, yes and no. Emotional dysregulation, if we say. It can be moodiness also. extremely enthusiastic. One day I feel I have so much energy, I can shake the whole world. And next day, it's like the whole world can't shake me out of my bed.
So, this is emotional dysregulations. See, life has its ups and downs. Kabhi khushi, kabhi gum. But sometimes what happens? Our mind goes way up and way down.
And then it can become very disruptive. Because, especially not only for ourselves, but for those who are dealing with us. Because if you are working with someone, you are relating with someone, it's like which person is going to come on that particular day.
In psychology, this is sometimes called as manic depressive personality or manic depressive disorder. So one day a person has incredible energy, and the next moment, and after some time, the person has no energy at all.
So emotional dysregulation is a significant challenge. What we normally call as moodiness.
Is that in the mind or in the body?
It can be both. We talk about the relationship between the mind and the body. Because if we consider, say, fear, when fear becomes, say, a panic attack, there are physical symptoms of it. So, it's a good question. There is a physiological component to it, and there is a psychological component. We'll discuss that shortly.
Disproportional emotional response.
Disproportional emotional response.
Yes, that's a good point. So you could put it in emotional dysregulation, but it is more of, we could put it over here as one aspect of disproportion is dysregulation is disproportion. Or actually it could be it's excessive, what we talked about, excessive can be in terms of desire, it can also be in terms of emotion.
So, thank you. And you want to add anything more? So, I will talk about this topic in three broad parts. I will talk about this using a framework from the Bhagavad Gita. What I speak will be in terms of the acronym CHIT. So, C will be the concept. What is the concept of the mind? I just described the Bhagavad Gita. Then I see how that theoretical concept can give us insight into the working of our life or the mind in our life. And then finally we talk about some takeaway. What can we do? What can we learn to manage our mind? So, as far as the concept of the mind is concerned, the Gita explains that our existence is three levels. There is each of us, we have the self is three levels. So there is our physical side, that is the body. Then there is a mental side, and then there is a spiritual side, which is the Atma. So the body, mind, and soul. And from the body, from the soul comes out what is called as Chaitanya. So Chaitanya is consciousness. And if you consider, can you see this flashlight, the beam of light coming from it? So the source of that light is the Atma, is like the Atma, and the beam of light coming from it is the Chaitanya. Now can you see that light? Not so much. Now we are able to see it slightly. Now we are able to see it fully. So basically, like this, for us, the consciousness, it comes from the body, it comes from the soul, but the consciousness is channeled through the mind, and then it comes to the body. So many times, when we are focusing, what happens is that we get caught by the mind. So let's try to understand in a particular way. So one way to simply understand this is, we could use a computer system metaphor. The body is like the hardware, the mind is like the software, and the soul is like the user. So within this conception, what exactly happens? First, what is the concept over here? That the mind is the link between the source of consciousness and the physical body and the physical world. So for example, when you are looking at me right now, for you to pay attention, to understand what is going on, what I am speaking, the soul, mind and body need to be in one line. And we use this terminology as okay, where are you today? Come back to earth, come back to earth. This is sometimes we feel absent minded. So when we are absent minded, what exactly happens in this model? The soul is here, the mind goes somewhere here, and the body is still here. So then in that case, the consciousness, yellow color visible, the consciousness gets split between the body and the mind. Now it could be that maybe 10% consciousness is here and 90% is here. Or it could be 50% is here, 50% is here. So basically, this is the essence of distraction. So when distraction happens, basically, the mind wanders off. So if you are hearing a long talk, during a long talk, the mind goes for a long walk. And then, when that happens, suddenly there's humor in the talk. Mind comes in like, hey, what was the joke? I also want to laugh. I want to enjoy it. So here, the mind is basically a software. So when we have, now in this case, when I talk about the mind, the role, functionally, the purpose of the mind is to be like an inner screen. So it's a screen, when I use the word software, what the mind is meant to do is take the inputs from outside, from our eyes, from our ears, from our touch, the various senses, and integrate them on the screen. And then the soul sees that and responds. So that is the functional role of the mind. Now here, within this particular model, the mind is related to but different from the brain. The brain is a part of the physical body. The brain is closely related to the mind, but the brain and the mind are not the same. So now within us, so the brain broadly you could say something like a CPU in a computer system. The CPU is a physical structure. The software itself is not a physical structure. You can't point to a software. You can say this is where the software is located. You can't touch the software. The mind is subtle. So when I said in my childhood I was growing up, I was having these issues. I read a lot about the mind. I read books of psychology, I read books of philosophy. And when I came across this particular model of the self in the Bhagavad Gita, I found this the most practical as well as the most rational understanding that I have got till now. And I'm still very interested in psychology. I keep reading it every day. And I see that how many of the insights that come from current psychology can actually be integrated in the Gita's model to help us function. So what is the two key points which I talk about with respect to this model, and then we'll move forward to the insights. So distraction is a problem. Now, is the mind living or non-living? Is the mind a thing or a being? What do you think?
Is it just a thing?
It's a thing, yes. Well, yes and no. What happens is the software a thing or a being? Well, software is a thing, but software is not a thing like this water bottle. Software has programming in it. And based on its programming, certain things it might just start with. So certain things it might more inclined to do. So what do we by programming? If you consider the mind to be like our browser. So if we have visited certain websites, then those will be stored in the history, and if we type any related letter, those will come as audio. So the mind is like that. While the mind is a screen, it's an integrator, but it's not just like a passive integrator. What it does is, if you consider software metaphor over here, concept of trauma. If somebody has been traumatized by something, and maybe somebody saw a bomb explosion, especially since trauma there are many kinds, but in the West, I spent about 6 months in America here, 3 to 6 months, so I spoken to people who are war veterans, and they saw a bomb explode right in front of them, and they saw their colleague blow to smithereens. And then after that, when they come back, even the small thing falls. It is water falls creates a sound. It reminds them of that particular thing. So, what this model says is that the mind, it is a screen, but it is not just a screen that allows stimulus to pass through. It is something more. The mind is also a storehouse. Just like the browser history stored. So like that, in the mind, there are whatever we have experienced, that especially whatever has what experience has impacted us significantly, that gets stored. And once it gets stored, these are called as impressions. To some extent, from the concept of the mind, I have now moved to the inside part. How do we help the mind make sense of our working in life? So some impressions in Sanskrit are often called as samskar. And the word samskar has a positive connotation where certain ceremonies are done to create certain samskar, some impressions. There's Vivaha samskar, there's Antya samskar, there's Namakaran samskar. Those refer to specific ceremonies meant to create impressions. But the word samskar also means impressions that are there. Now, the word samskar, what is the characteristic that there is an impression in the mind? Once I was giving a talk like this in a university in America, and the organizer was behind me. The organizer wanted to say something to me. So I was just tapped me in the shoulder. And I tapped me in the shoulder. I was screaming. I didn't fallen on this side and I had a sprain there. Oh, I didn't know that. So what happens? That if there is a small stimulus and there is a large reaction, now normal touch should not evoke a scream. If small touch is evoking a scream, that means there's something wrong with it. As they said, there will be a physical wound, like that there will be a psychological. So samskar indicates what you already talked about, disproportionate reaction. So a small stimulus, but a huge reaction. So when this happens, this is where we all have certain samskars. Sometimes in a normal conversation you may say, did I touch a nerve over there? Have you used this phrase? Have you heard this phrase? Did I touch a nerve? That means when we speak something, the other person seems to be agitated by it. So it's like when we are, if our dentist is doing some cutting or some extraction or whatever, they touch a nerve, it causes a lot of pain. So like that, that's an equivalent. So when we have some samskaras, then a small stimulus causes a huge reaction. So say somebody was bitten by a dog in the child. And as soon as they see a dog, the dog might be a small, gentle, cuddly poodle. But seeing that dog, so what happened over there is a small impression, a small stimulus leads to a large impression. So this is the characteristic of samskar. When we talk about samskar, let's try to understand it a little bit further. Now, of course, the other possibility is also there of samskar. Sometimes there can be a large stimulus and utterly no reaction, or very little reaction. This is also an alternative possibility. So, for example, this is where a person can become deadened. So, if somebody has seen a lot of violence, a lot of brutalization in real life, then somebody is a butcher who regularly kills, then even if they see some killing happening, it seem to have any conscience at all. Like somebody else is being subjected to a lot of pain, or they themselves are causing that pain to others. They seem to have no response. So what is happening over here is there is an internal malfunction. The sanskaras, essentially what they do is they change the way we respond. So addiction, for example, talk about desire. I have a friend in America who was earlier an alcoholic and now he's a spiritual practitioner. So one of the big problems with any kind of addiction is, one of the biggest problems is what is called the no problem problem. No problem means is denial. It's no big deal, I'm not having a problem. So he told me that he was in Fortune 500 company, he was in a very respectable position. And not all alcoholics are dysfunctional. Many of them function, they are very high performing individuals. But when alcohol grips them, then they just lose all sense of perspective over it. So he was invited to an international leaders meet for this company, the 7-star hotel. And it was his first invitation. He went to a resort in Switzerland for that. And from America. And when he was there, he was passing by toward the boardroom for the meeting. And he saw there was some drinks there. And he looked at the drinks, went towards the meeting, and then he met his boss over there. And in his mind, he was talking with the boss, and the boss' body changed into a bottle of alcohol. That's when he was scared. So what happened? A small stimulus, just a passing glance, but the reaction was something which just completely dominated the mind. It fills the mind. So in terms of, we go back to this particular example over here. What happens if we have certain samskaras? Then if some stimulus comes in over here, the stimulus might be tiny, but by the time it passes through it, it becomes so large that it completely fills the mind. And then, if we as souls are here, all that we see on the inner screen is only this much. We don't see anything else. So, the mind, now if we go back to, earlier I talked about distraction. Distraction is where the mind wanders off. Now here, what I am talking about is, distraction is also a possibility. But here we are talking about when distraction happens. Again, you could call that a person thinking about a bottle of alcohol, they're talking with their boss. You could call it a form of distraction. But it's not distraction, what we talk about is a random wandering. It's more like an addictive craving which is dominating. But in general, the challenge with the function of the mind is that there are these samskaras inside, there are these impressions inside, and there are stimuli from outside. And which stimuli will trigger what reaction, will trigger what impression from inside, we do not always know. And thus we get over. So when anxiety comes up, for example, the panic attacks can be very much of a physiological stimuli. But before we go to that, there's anxiety. So anxiety means we talk about imaginary anxiety. So what happens is that there is some stimulus, which may be not a very dangerous stimulus, but that stimulus reminds us of some past experience. Now we may not even remember what was the past experience, but that activates something inside us. And once that gets activated, that just completely consumes us. That fear may not be logical. So I said that I found this particular model very robust because I am a very rational person. And I like to understand everything rationally, I like to explain everything rationally. So logic, I like everything with logic. And I was never interested in any kind of religion or spirituality till it was presented to me logic and the questions were answered. But at the same time, what was most frustrating for me was that while I wanted everything to logically, I noticed that my own behavior many times was not logical. That I would get upset by some things, I would get irritated by some things. So here, what I found is that there is a logical and there is psychological. So psychological does not seem to be logical. So when you say that people are rational, that people are emotional. But what the Gita helped me to understand is that the psychological also is logical. And logic will not be immediately apparent. That is, why do I get so irritated by this thing? Why do I feel so hurt by such words? But what was happening is that I understood impressions inside. And those impressions inside me, they get triggered, then my response is not logical. It's a small thing was spoken by, a small thing was, why should I get so worked over? But it is that if somebody taps me on my shoulder and I scream, that's not logical. Till I understand the point that there is a good over. So once we understand that, even the illogical, irrational emotionality or inadequate cravings that we might experience, we will be able to make better sense of this. So, I talk about the power of the mind. Now, I talk about on one side from a negative perspective right now, that how there can be disruptive and destructive overreactions to certain stimuli. How that can be a big problem. But if the impressions inside are healthy, then that can actually make us resilient. That means that resilient means consider the same point samskaras. There could be a huge negative stimulus and it could be a small negative reaction. But this is where sometimes you can say today we use the word. Who would refer this? How can you be so calm? A former Indian captain, known was called as Captain Who. He had this capacity to stay very calm even amidst remarkably high pressure situations. So now, these inner impressions can also be positive. And what we will try to discuss today is how the samskaras inside us. What can we do to manage our mind better? And that we talk about the samskaras and how to change minds. But let me give you an example of what positive impressions can be. When I came in Singapore, we noticed that I need touches for walking. So when I was about 1, I got polio. I was staying in a small town in Maharashtra. My mother took me to a clinic to get the polio vaccine. But because it was a small town and there's often power supply outages, the clinic had a power supply outage in the previous night. And because of that, the fridge in which the vaccine had been kept had become quite heated. And due to the heat, the germs in the vaccine had run. Neither the attendant nor the physician knows. And when the vaccine was given to me, instead of preventing polio, it ended up causing polio. So I was about 1 and I was just learning to walk. And I fell down and I could never walk normally there. Now I don't remember any of that at present. But now when I travel across the world, I'm often invited to speak at places where people have special needs. And after I give a talk to them, and I talk with them, and when I talk with them, one thing that strikes me is some stories are extremely inspiring. People have no eyes. I have one deficient leg. There are people who have no legs or their hands on legs. Some stories are extremely inspiring. On the other side, a large number of people are fighting battles that are already lost. Maybe they had an accident which they lost their eyes. Maybe there's a medical issue because maybe they lost everything. Tragic. It happened. It happened 1 year ago, it happened 5 years ago, it happened 10 years ago. isn't really about my physical discipline. Now, I may have resentment about other things, not that I'm free from resentment. But when I look back at my life, there was one incident that shaped, created a very powerful positive samskar. I was probably 2.5 or 3, and a distant relative had come to our home, and she was consoling my mother, and so sad, the son got very low. And I remember my mother's voice, calm, clear, confident. She said, whatever he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually. I don't know why she said that, but somehow that stayed with me. And because it stayed with me, I just didn't identify with my physical size. I couldn't play outdoor game like other kids would play. But as I started studying, I noticed that I read quite rapidly. I remember things very well. I could analyze and articulate things clearly. So somewhere at the back of my mind, it settled. I could say that that I have this physical ability, and it's unfair. But there's a boy in our neighborhood who was very good in physical activities, very athletic, and he used to mock me. He used to use words like and things. So I was a little more annoyed and hurt by it. But one day my mother told me that boy's mother has requested that he is not so good at maths and he's struggling in school. She wanted me to help him in maths. My first reaction was no. I said, no, they are neighbors. And he is your friend. He's not my friend. So, but he said, no, we have to help him. Right? So then I started trying to explain maths to him. And then it struck me. And I was trying to tell him that just did not have the intellectual ability to process basic activity. We have IQ, some people may have 160, 170 IQ. Some people may have their IQ is lower than their weight. It's unfortunate, but so when he just couldn't get what I was telling him, one part of me wanted to laugh. Then suddenly it struck me that he is mocking me for my physical disability. I have physical limitation that is visible. He also has an intellectual limitation. You know, so easily visible, it is there. And he was trying, but he was struggling to get it. So it struck me that if I start laughing at him, I start mocking him, how am I actually any different from him? And then slowly that thought crystallized. I could say that, okay, I didn't really deserve this physical disability. I can also say I didn't really deserve this intellectual ability. So, in the long run, in the big picture, if we see, life may be unfair, but it is fairly unfair. What do you mean by fairly unfair? In some areas, we get worse than what we deserve. In some areas, we get better than worse. When we were growing up, maybe as a kid in our school, in our premise, considered was a bully. Maybe there's a teacher who was special liking for us. Among our relatives, somebody might be trouble us a lot. Somebody else might just be very kind to us. But there are some people who bring happiness wherever they go. And there are some people who bring happiness whenever they go. Everybody is like, both these kind of people will be there. Maybe not to that extreme, but will be there. So one of the most defining choices in our life is, what is it we're going to focus on? We focus on how life is fair, then our life will go on an upward trajectory. We focus on how life is unfair, our life will go on a downward trajectory. So that particular statement of my mother that whatever he lacks physically, God will provide him intellectually. But that particular statement created a very life-defining or life-changing impression. point is that impressions can work both positively and negatively. So the mind's negative impressions can make us very fragile. Mind's positive impressions can make us very robust, very resilient. So this is the inside part. Now I do the last part. The acronym. What was the acronym I was discussing? Chit. Chit is how to expand Chit's consciousness. So how to expand our consciousness and understanding about the mind. But about concept and insight, and he was the takeaway. So what do we do with respect to managing our mind? So what I am talking today is about, can be applied to anything. It can be applied to distraction, it can be applied to anger, it can be applied to addictive cravings, it can be applied to anxiety, whatever. So the mechanism of the working of the mind remains the same. So broadly, the mind is affected by two things. There is, the mind is affected by external perceptions, the stimuli that come from outside, and the mind is affected by internal impressions. So, if we want to better manage our mind, we need to change both of these. So change the external perceptions, change the internal impressions. Let's look at, now these two are related. So I talk about them first in a distinct way, and then I talk about how they are related. How this can not just be like a sequential A and B. It can be a cyclic process where both of them can change in a mutually reinforcing way. So for all of us, I said earlier, if we consider our social circle, let's start with external impressions. Now external impressions, so external perceptions, these can fall broadly into categories. There are people around us and there are places around us. So now if we consider these particular social places, so our external environment, there will be things in our external environment which strengthen us, which calm our mind, which energize us, which fill us with positivity. And there are things which weaken us. So suppose somebody is an alcoholic who is trying to recover from alcoholism. And if their home is right next to a bar, then what is going to happen? There will be no bar for them to go to the bar. See, everybody has weaknesses. The deadliest combination for us is, one more point I'll add over here, the internal impressions that are there. Sometimes they get activated on their own. Sometimes something external triggers us. So when we get distracted or we get filled with anxiety, we get an addictive urge, craving. Sometimes it may start from outside in, sometimes it start from inside out. Outside in means somebody is an alcoholic. They see a ad for a particular brand of alcohol, they pass by a bar, and they get excited. That's one way. Other is inside it's some memory box. Oh, let's try to drink it. And then they will go into it. So it can be outside in or inside out. Both ways we will get caught. Now the thing is, the worst combination is when, if we consider, we may get attacked. So if there is a simultaneous outside in and inside out, that is the worst situation to be in. That means there is the urge to drink that is coming from inside. At the same time, somebody offers us a drink from outside. Now that it's almost sure that we will fall. So if you consider recent geopolitical history. If say Israel Hamas, I'm not on two political sides in the war. Say Israel had lowered its guards out of complacency or whatever. And when their guards were lowered, when there were no physical soldiers deputed at the border, that's the time when Hamas attacked. So the inside-out efficiency was there. At the same time, there was the outside-in attack. So the both happening together is the most deadly for us. For example, we are already feeling a little down. Our moods go up and down. We feel already a little bit down, and then somebody speaks terribly discouraging comments. I knew I made a mistake at extreme. I knew you were a loser. I knew I could never count on you. So now what happens? If that person, if we are already at a vulnerable moment, and that time that kind of comment comes, it just shatters us. So now we will try to, that's why we talk about both. How outside is what we can regulate, and inside out how we can change. So external environment, there will be certain things that strengthen us, certain things that weaken us. So for example, if we tend to get very distracted. Now if we get very distracted, okay, watch this movie, see this on YouTube, see this on Instagram, watch this movie, do this, do that. Then go, so wherever we are weakened, go away from it. Wherever it's strengthened, we go toward it. So if somebody is a recovering alcoholic and their home is right next to a bar, they are serious about recovering from alcoholism, they need to relocate somewhere away from the bar. Now, going away physically may not be that easy. Nowadays, the blanket and everything is all somewhere, however far it is. That vulnerability has increased so much because of technology. But my point is, we can create some distance. We can create some bonds. So we need to each evaluate within the limitations that we have, how can I put myself in an environment that strengthens me? And how much can I avoid a strengthened environment that weakens me? So if you want to study, we think, okay, I can lie down in my room on a bed and I'll study. And what will happen is, the book will be in front of us and the book will be on our results. And we'll be fast. Want to see what study? We go to the library, we go to a place where somebody else is studying, and then that they help us stay awake. So we have to see our own is the place where the external environment can be supportive rather than destructive. So now, again, this is not a foolproof solution because as an inside of it, I can overwhelm. And you can always control the environment. But to whatever extent you can, you should. So now here, when I came to the campus, I considered visit and come here. There's a lot of greenery over here. And although it's in the city, it is not, you don't immediately feel as if it is right in the city. So the greenery itself brings some level of calmness, some peace. So if you're agitated, instead of just glaring at our phone about something that has gone wrong, come out, go for a walk in nature. Look at the sky, look at nature. It's an external environment. If we have some spiritual place like a temple, we can go there. So we try to find an external environment which is uplifting to us. We also try to create youth centers near major colleges where they can also provide spiritual strength. But the idea is each one of us can take inventory of our environment and see which environment will minimize our exposure to agitating stimuli. Will distract or disrupt us.
So you were talking about like an alcoholic person who will not take alcohol that he becomes act. But what if that alcoholic person feel like a strengthened more than any other activity?
That person felt strengthened by taking alcohol.
Yeah, more than doing anything. In which case it would.
Yeah. So the thing is that yes, why do people drink alcohol? a coping mechanism.
It's just a metaphor. It's not a
Okay, so my point is that each one of us find out what strengthens us and what weakens us.
So you are saying that removing the addiction, we have to edit something else.
I'll come to that. Yes, so we have to, whatever it is, say if whenever somebody feels down, when they feel down, they want that epidemic. But maybe they can do something else. If they can find something else which is meaningful that they can do, which is somewhat more positive stimulating, they develop a healthy habit, they develop a healthy relationship, they develop a healthy hobby. In general, in Sanskrit there is the word anartha. Anartha is that which is meaningless, or that which drives us toward a thing which is meaningless. So the way to remove an anartha, if we are here and we are caught in an anartha, the way to remove it is to bring some artha into it. And to make that artha just as important, if not more important. So we have to find out this. So I'm going to come to the placement part later. But right now I'm talking about the principle of oneness. Find out what is, so somebody says, say I was in Columbus, and in America there's a huge problem of addiction. And that is somewhat different from the problem which is said in Uttar Punjab or somewhere else. This is actually people get addicted to painkillers. I knew this Indian boy who was really addicted to it. He was an IIT, they went to IIM, then went to America. And his first year in America, when he went for PhD over there, he was in a very terrible car crash. He survived, but he had a thigh surgery and went to the wound. He was nothing there. And that time he was doing pain medication. And he was addicted to the pain medication. Unfortunately, some of these pain medications have been designed in such a way as to get it. So books like the Empire of Pain, which describe how this pain medication is profiting big pharma is quite dangerous in that direction. But anyway, so when he went to me, he was saying that I had so many dreams for my life, what I wanted to do. I just can't go around anything because it's completely consuming me. So then I told him, what would you, imagine if you didn't have this addiction, what would you like to do? So he said, I had a lot of interest in chemistry, a lot of chemistry. He said, I want to change my PhD direction and try to do more research on non-addictive pain medication. So I said, that's a noble thought. You have found a purpose through your pain. So I asked him that, okay, how far have you gone in that direction? He said, I'm not really much at this point. There are days when I'm just dysfunctional because of withdrawal symptoms. And today is a day of relative lucidity. And I'm not functioning. So at that time, we just become so disappointed with ourselves. And during this time, when the urge is not that we keep beating ourselves, why did I do that? Why did I do that? But instead of that, during this time, focus on doing something of value. Now, if you keep doing this, okay, gradually by this, the surges will change, the volume will decrease, the frequency will also decrease. And gradually we will get better. This will take time to happen, but that's the key point. We need to, instead of worrying about what areas we don't have control over, so we have to focus on what areas we do have control over. So it's helpful to, another thing I said, I found this model very helpful is that there are, even the Gita's model, there are 3 levels of reality: the soul, mind, and body. So the Gita says the mind is also real, and it is like a body. Now if I have a fracture in my arm, and if somebody tells that, please get rid of this suitcase, I say, I cannot. I don't have to feel guilty about it. And if somebody sends me on a guilt trip, I don't have to go on it. Because it's a physical limitation. Like that, there can be mental limitation. Now, somebody who is bitten by a dog, they feel scared when they see a dog. That person doesn't have to feel guilty. So, if we are very volatile, if we are very moody, or we have some addiction, we don't have to burden ourselves with guilt because of that. It is. So, with respect to the mental health problems, with respect to another part, there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is from the moral perspective. In the past, mental health problems were all dismissed as just be good. Come on, be strong. 50 or 100 years ago, if some businessman or some student committed suicide, the typical response would be, oh, this is a tough world. If you can't take it, you should not be here. It's your problem. Today we consider it very harsh. So instead of a moral perspective, we can look at it from a mechanical or clinical perspective. What is mechanical or clinical? That means there is a wound over there. So if a touch over there causes me pain, that doesn't make me a weak or a bad person. But that also means that I have some limitations. I cannot deny my limitations. I can do some exercises to fix this. To what degree it will fix, I don't know. But there is a certain level of accepting our weaknesses or our wounds and accepting ourselves with our weaknesses. So that means I will have some limitations. That doesn't make me a this. Having some limitations does not make me a hero. Some people, like, if they have been victimized by something, don't tell everyone about how I was victimized. They want to garner some pity or sympathy or whatever. We don't want to go that extreme. But we don't have to go to the extreme of saying that nothing is wrong. So it's like self-acceptance. If we have this clinical approach, self-acceptance becomes much easier. Self-acceptance means 2 aspects. Accepting our weaknesses. That I have certain problems, I have certain issues. But it is also accepting ourselves with our weaknesses. Right? Accepting ourselves with our weaknesses. Yes, these weaknesses don't make me useless. They don't make me worthless. So if we don't accept our weaknesses, we will be in denial. And that is have its own problem. If we don't accept ourselves with our weaknesses, we will go into depression. I am worthless. No, that stressful situation came and I just collapsed. I am worthless. You will avoid both these extremes. Okay. This is part of my little answer. Answer the question. So, will I answer the question? We talk about movement. So let me complete my flow of thought over there. So I was talking here about itself. And it's well. But as much as possible, we can manage our environment. Now, one more point which I won't go into further. We all have our natures. Some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted. So some people are more structured. Some people are more adventurous. Like you see in the corporate world, people who start CEO, who start this, they are not very good at running the start for a long run. Because they want adventure, they want excitement, they want dramatic growth. But after the initial phases go on, after 2-3 years, they get a little bored. They want to sell off their startup and start something else. So we all, if you understand that my mind is made in a particular way, we can find for ourselves roles that our mind is most confident with. This applies to social circles also. In our social circle, there are people who value us and there are people who devalue us. Now, when I say people who value, that does not mean that people who praise us. And people who devalue does not mean that people who correct us. Sometimes people who value us may correct us, and people who devalue us may praise us. So, like I say, generally after I give a talk, for me giving a talk is not just a matter of delivery, it's a matter of discovery. I like to explore the object, I like to understand which point is connected to the audience. So, sometimes after I travel across the world, and whenever I go, say some venues I go regularly once in 6 months, once a year. So I know certain members of the audience in those places, they give my classes seriously. And after the class, when I come there and it takes a sign book or something like that, I talk with them what point they like. Some people say, I like everything. Now, maybe they actually like everything, or maybe that is just their way of saying that don't ask me, don't force me to think. So the point is that they say, oh, it is a wonderful talk. Now, that saying it is a wonderful talk may actually be devaluing. I don't want to think much about it. What do you know? Somebody says, oh, this point is not very clear. I don't agree with this point. Now, that may actually be more value for me. Maybe I didn't present this point. Maybe I did not consider this. So when I say people who value us are not simply people who value us, people who flatter us, but people who care for us, people who are our well-wishers. If we are down, they will encourage. If we are flying high in the sky, they will bring us back to the ground also. So people who devalue us, they will criticize us, or they will just not care for us. So for us, we need to go, spend more time and connect more with people who value us. And keep a distance from people who devalue us. You don't have to be inimical to them. But this is one way the external stimuli that we get will be actually very supportive for us. So, each one of us, we can look in our friendships, our relationships, who are the people who love us, who are the people who guide us, and try to focus on that direction. In the spiritual circles, there is the concept of satsang. Now, satsang is not just about going to some place where something about spirituality or God is talk about anything. That's one part of it. But it is also forming friendships. Forming friendships with people who are more positive, who are pursuing something more meaningful in their life. And that way, each one of us can actually move. So that is with respect to external stimuli, how we can change. Now, for the internal, I already talked a little bit, let me complete that one. As I said, the mind is affected by external perceptions and internal impressions. Now, the internal impressions, how can they be changed? So, if you remember, I talked about the mind is like a software. So, with respect to the software, what is required? Say, I am based in Mumbai. That's when I'm going to 15 days over there. But that's my base. In Mumbai, there is this small place. Have you heard of this?
and there are also people know about Bollywood. So everywhere. So now somebody has visited a website called Bollywood.com, and they come across a spiritual talk like this, and they hear about the Bhagavad Gita, and they want to know a little bit more about the Bhagavad Gita. So they open their browser and start typing Bhagavad Gita, and they type B, and what happens? Yeah, Bollywood.com as a autocomplete. They didn't want that to come, but it's come because that's the past history. So our sanskaras are like that. Certain things will come as autocomplete even when we don't want to. This is where the sanskara, what happens? We tend to do what we don't intend to do. What we don't intend to do. I started out with intending to read a book, read an academic book, but I ended up spending 2 hours on social media. That's because the impressions are there. But now, again, you may say, oh, I am such a weak person, I have no determination, I have no willpower. Don't go in that moral direction. Focus on the clinical approach. The clinical approach is, say, if we had visited Bollywood.com 10 times. Now, if you want to visit Bollywood.com, even if Bollywood.com comes as autocomplete, okay, I don't need to go there. Just focus on typing the full Bhagavad Gita. It might be a little difficult because you type all those 12 letters. Sorry, not getting one. So now it takes some effort. But if you do that, that also gets stored in the process. Next time we type B, Bollywood.com is still come as the first autocomplete. But Bhagavad Gita will also come as one of the autocompletes. Now if you keep visiting Bhagavad.com, gradually that will start coming as autocomplete. Now best would be if you want to change what comes with autocomplete is, keep visiting Bhagavad.com and don't visit Bollywood.com. But even if you incidentally visit Bollywood.com, just keep visiting Bhagavad.com. That will be stored in the process. So, with respect to changing the impressions in the mind, it is that the key point is repetition. So, rather than thinking whether I am going to break this habit or not, whether I am going to stick this habit for or not, just think that we repeat it. So, repetition is, in many spiritual traditions, there are rituals. Now, the word ritual sometimes has a negative connotation, especially when we use an adjective, ritualistic. Something is done mindlessly, something is done perfunctorily because we are told to do it. But actually, rituals also have a positive connotation. There are books like CEOs say, my 3 morning rituals, I journal, I do this, I do that, I exercise, whatever. So, rituals are activities that we repeat. Now, there is a difference between rituals and routines. Routines could be every day we have to wash our clothes, we have to do our home, we have to do our laundry, we have to do our plates. When we are doing some routines, the point is to get the thing done. Now, while we are doing the laundry, we might just talk on someone, we might watch something, hear what you do. Doing the laundry does not require personal attention. The point is to get the thing done. But in rituals, the point is not to get the thing done, it is to get the experience. The point is that the more we immerse ourselves in an experience, the more an impression is going to be formed. The purpose of rituals is actually to get the experience so that the experience becomes an impression. So, for example, when we chanted, we did a deep breathing at the start of our talk, we did the Om recitation. In various traditions, there is mantra chanting. But these are ways in which we can create healthy impressions for us. So, the repetition is so the way we change the impressions inside us is that we just focus on doing the healthy activity repeatedly. So now I'll make 2 points about this and I can conclude that first is pop-up in the mind. Like on our phone, a notification will pop up. Your friend has updated their Instagram photo. What do we put on Instagram? Updated the Facebook profile. That's a notification. It is pop-up, it comes. Whereas I've given a thought means it's voluntary. It's something that we choose to do. Hope this difference is clear. You understand what I'm saying more about this? I just got a thought, I gave this a thought. So combining these two senses, not all thought merits thought. That means what? Not every pop-up needs to be built on. So for us, sometimes we may resolve, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to waste so much time on social media. But then we are studying and suddenly a thought let's look at it someday. And studying, okay, because the thought has come up now. No, the thought will come, it will stay for some time and go. Then pop-up is a notification. Now, in our phone, we can disable the notifications. But there's no disable button in our mind. But the point is that there are unhealthy impressions and there are healthy impressions. So whatever healthy impressions are there, the healthy impressions we cultivate them, we try to do more. And the unhealthy impressions we try to distance ourselves. We try to not so much reject them as neglect them. There's no need to fight against it. When if you're typing B and Bollywood.com is coming, there's no need to get angry at Bollywood.com. Just focus on Bollywood.com. Sometimes what happens, something discouraging happens and we start feeling depressed. And everybody said, I'm not going to get depressed. But then, still that feeling, oh, nothing works out for me, I guess. Maybe my life has changed. Some depressing thought. Sometimes what happens, we decide that I won't get depressed. And then when we get a depressing thought, we feel depressed and we got depressed. Or sometimes we say, I'm not going to get angry. And then we start getting angry. And then we get angry, then we got angry. So no need to get caught in that mental vortex. There is an autocomplete that comes. And sometimes that autocomplete we also need to complete. That means we start yelling at someone. But instead of labeling, oh, I'm just short tempered person. Just so as soon as you realize what has happened, pull back. Pull yourself back from there. So don't be discouraged if there are relapses. Don't be discouraged if the changes don't happen immediately. This is a chemical process, it will take some time. So try to cultivate the healthy thoughts and try to avoid the unhealthy thoughts. And then with respect to repetition, I'll conclude with one point. That with respect to the browser, all that is required is a mechanical repetition. But with respect to our mind, if you want the impressions to be formed, it is not just the three factors that determine how fast the impressions will change. This is how we can become mentally fit. That is the frequency, the intensity, and the time duration. So how often, how deep, and how long. If we want to create healthy impressions, so how often we do it? So if we tend to get anxiety, get anxious, we find that we taking some deep breaths, chanting some mantras helps us. Then try to chant mantras, try to do deep breathing regularly, frequency, and do it intensely. Try to be immersed in it. Except we take 3 deep breaths. That is a bar. The point is not to get a deep 3 deep breaths. The point is to slow our breathing. The point is to our thinking. The point to get ourselves out of our breathing. So do it intensely. And see if you do it for longer time. Our schedules are busy, we can't always do it for longer time. But sometimes on weekend, sometimes if there are some retreats, so you can go to some places, get some immersive experiences. If you do this, you will find that your mind will become more and more fit. The impressions will change, they will become more and more resilient. discussion about what the mind is and what the problems are. Then I talk about three main things. What was Chaitanya was the concept. With the concept, we discuss the Gita's model of the inner world. There is the soul, there is the mind, and there is the body. So this is like the three-level software, the hardware, software, and the user. Now from the mind comes Chaitanya. So from the soul comes Chaitanya through the mind, and it goes out. So when this happens, at that particular time, we understood how the mind can have some problems. Is that one is the mind just wanders off somewhere, and then the consciousness gets split, partly going here and partly going here. This is distraction. Now, when this is happening, why does the mind wander off, or why does the mind become a trouble for us? So this is the insight. We discuss the key concept of the mind. That the mind is like a screen which is integrating inputs from outside and giving us something to the screen. It not only is a screen, it's also like a software. It has a memory. And because of that memory, it is also not just integrating, but it is also modifying the stimuli that are coming. This is where we discuss the concept of samskara. Samskara and impressions. What is possible? A small stimulus can lead to a large reaction, like a physical wound. So samskara is that it's like a wound. So one way to understand what samskara is, everybody has some scar. So it's like a wound for the mind. And because of this, we may all tend to have our weaknesses. And we may overreact, whether it's anger or anxiety or it is depression, moodiness, whatever it is, addiction. So three features about this model is that the mind is real. So mind's moods are also real, like physical moods. The mind is real, and that can help us to take the approach. It doesn't have to be a moral approach where we need to beat ourselves up. Moral approach is helpful at times, but we can have more of a clinical approach or a mechanical approach. The mind is just a software, and right now it's malfunctioning. And this can lead us to a healthier self-acceptance. So self-acceptance means we accept our weaknesses. We accept our weaknesses, but also we accept ourselves with our weaknesses. We accept ourselves with our weaknesses. Now, I talk here about also about how the samskaras can be both positive and negative. So the negative, they can make us very fragile. We may overreact to certain things, but positive can make us very resilient. I talk about how my mother's words help me to process my physical disability. Life may be unfair, but in the big picture, life is fairly unfair. So rather than worrying about how it is unfair, focus on how it is fair. And then I talk about the takeaway. What do we do about this? We talk about, because the mind is affected by external perceptions and internal impressions. So this is perceptions, we talk about two things: places and people. Overall, the principle of the same places is those places which are positive, uplifting for us, we go more towards them. The negative, which are provocative for us, we try to keep a distance from them. Similarly, with respect to people, those who value us, we try to go closer to. Value doesn't mean necessarily praise, and devalue doesn't mean criticize. But those who value, those who care for us. So in this way, the external perceptions, we can be more selective. We can try to find good in
uncontrollable phase. That if the surges are going up, then even if we can't resist the urges, focus on, we can persist in between. And this way we can move on. And then I took the example of software. I will change software from, say, Bollywood to Bhagavad Gita. So what do? We focus on making our mind fit. So frequency, intensity, and time duration. By this, each one of us can actually change our mind and make it much more robust and thereby function in a much more effective way to justice to our world and conscience. Find fulfillment in life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to thank Chaitanya Charan Sir for such an enlightening and eye-opening talk. And so now it's the time for questions. So it's actually your time. So some might think that my question is very obvious or it might be very personal, but questions helps us to get a deeper insight of our understanding or the knowledge that we gain. So even in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna encourages Arjuna to ask more and more questions. So I would suggest that please don't hesitate to ask questions and to raise your hands. If anyone wants to ask questions, I think this is you'll have to means mic cannot reach, so you'll have to you can ask from there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I was more interested about, the talk was also interesting, but I wanted to know how you manage that you had anger issues. And
I had anger issues.
Yeah. And as regards that, you channeled the anger and the negative emotions into doing something good. And later you also ended up leaving your anger and you still retained and managed to improve your positive things like vocabulary and speaking ability. So how did you do that and how did you make that transition?
How would I manage my anger issues? Thank you for assuming that I managed them. Of course, I would say that rather than thinking of anger with a digital approach, like it's 1 or 0. I have anger under control or not under control. We can have a more analog understanding. Analog means what? That we all have anger, but the anger can be within boundaries. So some people, when they get angry, they may raise their voice. Some people may not just raise their voice, but speak swear words. Some people not just speak swear words, but they speak very obscene or offensive swear words. Some people get angry and raise their fists. Some people get angry and take out a knife. The President of America or the President of Russia, they get angry, they can nuke an entire country. So the point is that anger can be within different boundaries. So when we learn to manage our anger, essentially what it is that the anger comes within healthier and healthier boundaries. So in that sense, it's an analog progression rather than a digital switch. So for me, I think 2 things happened. One was at a subconscious level when I just understood the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita and I started practicing mantra chanting. At a subconscious level itself, it led to a certain change. That I just didn't feel that angry. I wouldn't get so worried about things. But now that I analyze it, one of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita is that every anartha has at its root some artha. Artha means something of value. So anartha and artha we consider the opposites, but they are not just is called as artha. But when does an artha become an anartha? When that artha becomes the only artha. This is not just an important thing, it's the most important thing in my life. It's the only important thing. That is in Sanskrit called as Paramartha. So when an artha becomes the Paramartha, that's when it becomes anartha. So money can become greed. We all need money, but when the money becomes too much, the craving for money becomes too much, that becomes greed. Now, we all need respect in life. Nobody likes to be disrespected. But when all our interactions are based only on how much I am respected, that will lead to ego. Now, we all need some control in our life. But when control becomes the only basis on which we do our actions, that's when it leads to anger. So, control doesn't lead to anger. It's like people who are control freaks. They tend to become angry. I told you to do this, why did you do this? Yes, maybe getting the person to do the right thing is important. But the relationship with that person is also important. Our image in society is also important. Our own peace of mind and perspective is also important. So when one thing becomes everything, that's when it becomes an anartha. So I found that what happened for me with spirituality is spiritual practices that I started getting a little bit more of a long-term perspective. That okay, the thing that I get worried about right now doesn't matter that much. It doesn't. Okay, it's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So spirituality expands our view of life. So that also helped me quite a bit. And I would say one of the key ways to deal with anger is not so much to control anger as to find what is it that is really matters so much to us. So if somebody did not listen to us and we feel angry. Now why do we feel angry? Is it because that person has repeatedly not listened to us and we feel that person is disrespecting us? Is it because we had a hard day and one more thing that has gone wrong, this is just pushing us beyond our limit? Or is it because, there are many reasons for that particular exclusion. So try to find out what really matters to us. And the more we can focus on that, then what happens is anger will become more manageable. Because anger is an emotion, and emotion is information. We can't just reject the information. Anger gives us the information that something is seriously wrong about something that is seriously important for us. But then, anger could be a misinformation. Misinformation in the sense that maybe it's not that wrong, or maybe the cause we are assuming for that wrong is not there. Maybe the person came late not because they disrespected, because there is an emergency. And maybe certainly the solution that anger is offered is worse than the problem. So accept. I feel angry right now. But what is the issue? At that moment it will be difficult. At that moment just learn to take some deep breaths, get a handle on yourself. But afterwards maybe at the end of the day have some time for journaling. And look at yourself and say, okay, what triggered me so much at this particular time? And if you do that, we get a better understanding of yourself. And once we get a better understanding of ourselves, we understand what we value in life. Then, see, everybody has the capacity to manage their anger. It is just that what we value matters. I was in Australia, I went to Australia a couple of days ago in Australia, and a couple had come to meet me. And the wife was looking quite embarrassed, and the husband was looking mischievous. And the wife said that my husband is a very responsible, diligent, caring person. But then, sometimes he gets so angry that he's scared of him. My husband was telling me that I never want my wife to be afraid of me. job matters more than my anger podcast. So now does your family matter for you? So of course it is. As that becomes sufficiently internally interested in you. So rather than saying that I can't control my anger, it is that at that particular time anger matters more than other things. So we have to make sure that other things matter more than other things. And actually requires some cultivation. Maybe write down why your family is important for you, why a long-term relationship is important for you. This is all of us have certain boundaries that we will not cross. No matter what happens, what provocation comes, what temptation comes, certain boundaries will not cross. But certain boundaries we may cross. So that's why it's a matter of, coming back to starting point, it's more of a digital, not a digital, it's analog. So three things for dealing with anger. First is see it in incremental. Set some boundaries within which you have to keep your anger rather than completely eliminate anger. Second is try to understand why there is a need for control that leads to anger. And third is focus on how you can shift your understanding of what matters more to you. And that way anger will be more manageable.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like you given the example of husband and wife, where husband voluntarily wants to control his anger. Okay.
Okay, just an announcement of a I have a couple of books outside. Much of what I spoke on the mind is there in a book published by HarperCollins, national bestseller about Gita for the CEO. It's here. So Gita for the CEO, and if you want, this book will be available. And also there's a book on the mind itself called You Are Not Your Mind. Much many of the concepts that I explained, they are explained here in short articles with some simple images, which are in these 2 pages. So I'll be here after the program also to sign the books or translate further questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So husband wants to voluntarily improve himself. Okay. But what if he just answer you that okay, my wife doesn't matter to me? And you want to think about it?
My wife does it.
Matters to me. Then what will you do?
My wife does it.
Matters to me. Like what's the wife feel?
Yeah, I don't think we can change that.
And what if that person in the hospital, you say that's the addiction of the painkillers. What if you ask that person that what do you want to else do? But what if that person told you that I don't want to do anything else? And what will you do?
So ultimately, we can help those who are unable. We can't help those who are unable. So there's a difference between unable and unable. So I think that everybody has to go through certain experiences in their own life where they start recognizing how dangerous their inner demons are. How dangerous the inner demons is and healthy impressions in mind. So like a doctor cannot force a patient to take treatment. So I think that everybody has to go through certain experiences and then they themselves feel the need for help. Then others cannot do that.
And what about those self-unaware persons who do suicides?
And that's what, as we go through life, we are forced to become aware of ourselves. In many ways, we are a mystery to ourselves. We don't know ourselves. And sometimes we react in ways that are so unexpected, so disobedient. And eventually, that draws us. And so awareness comes to just going through experiences, and not just going through experiences, but physically going through experiences, mentally going through our experiences, reflecting. That's how we do. What are your questions?
My name is Shivam, and I have a problem. I lose my temperament very soon. Whenever I
By temper or temperament?
temperament.
What do you mean temperament exactly?
Temperament exactly means my focus for doing a work. So I lose my focus very soon. Let's say we have a academic curriculum. So whenever we sit for a study or to understand something, we lose focus to understand, and we start
then suddenly it becomes a revolution. Initially, when we are trying to change ourselves, we will not see much change happening. It will be very incremental. But then it can become a revolution. The point of view is that whatever capacity you have to do the work that you are doing, start with it. So rather than thinking, okay, I have to study for 6 hours every day, or I am going to focus on this subject for 6 months. Just focus on it. Today, I am going to work on this for half an hour. And after you do it for half an hour, encourage yourself. Not that you have conquered you have climbed Mount Everest. You did a good job. So in general, self-esteem or self-respect, it develops primarily in only one way. Secondarily, others can encourage you, others can appreciate, that's good. But self-esteem develops basically by having a worthwhile goal and taking tangible steps toward that. You don't necessarily have to achieve that goal, but having a worthwhile goal and taking tangible steps toward it. That is the way we can improve ourselves, and we can also improve our own vision of ourselves, our own relationship with ourselves. So whatever is your capacity, try to do that much with gratitude and gratitude. Yes.
You were talking about anger and self-respect, self-esteem. Recently, one of the persons I knew committed suicide. Very recent, just 10 days back. When his suicide note, he mentioned that he was repeatedly harassed in a lab by his labmate, and he was yelled upon for sustained period of time. Now things and the fact that that person was autistic himself.
That person?
That person was autistic. It was not easy for him to make communication, to connect with people. So all the philosophy that we discussed here about anger management, or up to what extent it is it correct to just look for oneself to correct ourselves and try to say yourself that maybe I need to change my attitude, or maybe it's a me thing. But then there are also times when we have to take ourselves in hands. We have to take care of it. Because that person committed suicide. And most importantly, I think that we think of religion or spirituality as just being sitting in quiet and realizing yourself. But then, quite contrastingly, the Gita book itself was told in a battlefield, not in a jungle. What are your comments on that?
Yeah. Sorry about the kind of like what you mentioned. When something else happens, there's if you know somebody else what's called survivor's guilt. I have done something that will not be happening. Was did I do something that might push that person in the edge? It's difficult to deal with this. I can see that your question is not just coming from a place of casual curiosity, it's from a deep reflection of on the situation. So, to address your point, yes, spirituality has two distinct aspects to it. One is transcending the world, that means just going inward, going upward, and the other is transforming the world. So, the iconic image of Hanuman was instead of Hanuman has his hands folded, which represents Bhakti. But in his hands, there is also a Gada that represents Shakti. So actually, strength so that we can live with those situations. But also in what Shakti balance you can work to change the situations. So transcending is the Bhakti aspect. And transforming is the Shakti aspect. So both are required. Now, depending on the individual's position, sometimes we may have a greater role and opportunity to change the situation. Sometimes we may not have. So, which will be prioritized when? Spirituality is not, if spirituality was only about transcending, then it becomes impractical, then it becomes otherworldly, it becomes often escapism from it. And if it becomes only transforming, without any transcending element, then I've seen people who are very activists, very active, almost missionary in certain areas, but they often become very resentful or hateful even of those who don't support them, those who oppose them. To the extent they are passionate about a particular issue, to that extent they are really inimical, bitter about any result. And that's not very helpful. Sometimes when we end up becoming another way, the same part of the same problem that we had created. So, what spirituality tells us is that we are a part of a reality bigger than ourselves. Each one of us is potentially being. I'm sure each one of us is a part of the divine. And that means when we, so spirituality has this aspect of, one is connection. So through our personal spiritual practices, we connect with the divine. We remind ourselves that I am not alone. I am a part of a bigger reality. My life has a bigger purpose. And then the transforming is the contribution. What can I do? So connecting and contributing, both are there. If we are trying to contribute without connecting, we will become exhausted first. If we are connecting without contributing, then we just become irrelevant. So we want to have both these balanced in life. And as I said, Arjuna, he took time on a battlefield to understand the wisdom of faith. That was where he was connecting. And after that, he went in for the war. That was good for him. So spirituality is meant to be able to enable us to do both.
But Arjuna here had the assurance that he is in the company of God. But he is in the company of God, and the God.
But even if he was in the company of Krishna, it was not that Krishna was controlling him all the time. When he was fighting a war, it was not that Krishna was saying, "Don't shoot this guy, don't shoot this guy, don't do this, don't do this." Krishna wanted Arjuna to be his own individual.
But then the thing is that when somebody is in the conflict of ideas as to what action has to be taken at this point, and he's in conflict, whether should I choose A, whether should I choose to hold dear, or should I take an action? When the person is in conflict, how does he decide?
That depends on
Because
so that depends on two main things. That depends on our position and our disposition, our guna and our bhakti. So, for example, if there's somebody who is terrorizing some small kid, and we are passing by this. Now, if we are a part of the school administration, if we are in the school security, then we can't say, "I don't want to get involved in this." You have to get involved. That's your position. So if some riots are going on, police say, "I don't want to get involved." I know, that's their job. That's your dharma over there. So if we have taken a particular role, if we have a particular position, then it is necessary for us to do what we can do next. Now beyond that, different people have different dispositions. Some people may be more inclined to get involved in a particular issue. Others may be more inclined to get involved in some other issue, not that particular issue. So there are many structural issues, there is poverty, there are issues are there. Now, if we feel passionate about one issue, that's our expression work on it. So generally, for each one of us, we have one function of intelligence. Buddhi is what enables us to understand what are the big things in my life and what are the small things in my life. Now, small things does not mean that it is unimportant. But right now for me, this is not important. This is not something I can do. So that boy I was talking with in Columbus, he told me that now he said that he would like to replace all the, not have drugs which are like pain medication that are like. But that's not his control right now. What he can do is some research. And sometimes all that we can do is make a contribution toward making a difference. We can't even know whether our actions will make a difference. What we can know is, am I making a contribution toward making a difference? If I'm doing that, I'm doing my part. Sometimes my contribution will make a huge difference. Initially it's a revolutionary, it can go to a revolutionary. So that way we go, that's how we work.
And a follow-up question on that. So every person has their natural disposition, we understand that. And still somebody is fearful or is second guessing as to whatever action they are going to take. Whether will they be resentful about this, or is it good for them to do it?
It is good to take the approach of personal scientist who are around them. What do you mean by personal scientist? We treat our life like a science experiment. That sometimes we get involved in the issue and afterwards we feel, why did I get involved in this? Why did I say? Sometimes we don't get involved in the issue and then we feel guilty. Why did I get silent? So rather than getting caught in the emotions, just observe the situations and learn about yourself. So it's that way what happens. You treat the experiment, jigyasa, curiosity, can be a very empowering virtue to guide our life. So we understand ourselves. So should I, even when I have a discussion for a particular issue, is this the hill I want to die on? Maybe it is. So we take some small steps in particular areas, see how the impact is, see the impact was internally, the impact externally, and then we move forward. There are no absolute right and wrong actions at an individual level. The more we become spiritual, the more we keep some kind of practicing spirituality, the more we also unreserved spirituality is inner clarity. Inner clarity is greater understanding of ourselves, understanding of our strengths, understanding of our values, and then we can focus better on where we should not stay silent and where it is best to have a strategic silence that we can live to fight a bigger battle and a later day. So these are just adopt an experimental attitude. Have, rather than thinking of any particular decision as final or fatal, see that life is an experiment. Have an attitude of curiosity. Keep learning and keep going. Let's talk one-to-one on this. Thank you very much for your attention and participation. Hare Krishna.
So before we end, I would really like to thank Chaitanya Charan Sir for inspiring us, guiding us, and reminding us how important it is for us to take care of our mind and our life. So I would like everyone to give a big round of applause for announcements of the courses that our Voice Club conducts, which is LG6 Learn Gita in 6 days and DYS Discover Yourself. So in LG6 there are 6 sessions for 3 weeks. Each week we have two sessions for 1 hour each, and also there are good refreshments after the sessions, and you will get lot of practical tips from Bhagavad Gita itself of how to lead a better life and how to take care of mind. So, and also I would request everyone to fill the feedback forms and comment on how you like the session, and based on your interest you can take the following options that are available. And one more thing is that so there is a gift for all of us. Actually, so the pens that you are getting, you can keep them with yourself. So this is a gift from Voice Club to all of you. And thank you for joining us to the session. And you came for the session. You could have done something else in this time, but you came for this session. This itself highlights that how serious or sincere you all are for your mental health and your life. So I would like everyone to give a round of applause for yourself for coming to the session, and thank you for joining the session. With this, we have some refreshment snacks for you. So while going out, you can collect, and we have a heavy discount on the books that is written by Chaitanya Charan Sir. So I would encourage everyone to just have a look at them, and I guarantee you that will be very much helpful for every one of you. So please have a look, and thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us, and I would wish that you all keep on joining us for the coming sessions. Thank you. And if anyone has their questions left, they can ask Chaitanya Charan Sir. And also, if they buy books, they can get it signed by